The reason peer support is important is because a first responder who's hurting after a critical incident will pick up the phone and call one of their colleagues who's trained in peer support before they'll call a psychologist like me.
And this program is about CISM teams. Tell us what CISM is and how it relates to this other term that we've heard a lot, peer-to-peer.
Sure. Critical Incident Stress Management, CISM, is the umbrella term, and it may include, at the very beginning, peer-to-peer support, one-on-one individual peer-to-peer support. So that's one firefighter talking to a colleague of his, either at the gym or at the fire station before or after a call. Just that informal, hey, how you doing? Did you go on a tough call today? That kind of thing. And then there's diffusings. This happens shortly after a critical incident. Then there is debriefings, which follows a critical incident by maybe a few days and is more formal and structured. Could also include a referral to a therapist or another agency that maybe specializes in grief, for example.
Tell me what a CISM team is and what it does.
A CISM team is a group of first responders who want to help out their colleagues, want to intervene after a critical incident, want to assist if one of their colleagues is having a difficult time, either personally or professionally. A member of a CISM team can provide peer support to mitigate the stress on the job. We can stabilize a current crisis, firefighter or dispatcher or medic who's in personal crisis or immediately after a very difficult call. We can educate the crew on what are normal symptoms of critical incident stress, and when, at what point should you seek professional help, if at all. What are some good things to do after a critical incident? What are some things to avoid? Part of our mission is to educate. So stabilize crisis, normalize symptoms, and educate. And then the assumption is you were fine before this call, you'll be fine after this call. And of course, one of the most important functions that peer support plays is to help normalize some of the symptoms of critical incident stress, help them realize that they're experiencing normal reactions to an abnormal event. So what we want to accomplish, or what we want to provide to your agency, is an example of how a critical incident stress management team can be set up, can be implemented, what kind of obstacles or triumphs you might experience along the way, how it can benefit your agency. And I think the San Mateo Critical Incident Stress Team is so unique because we started out interdisciplinary, which means we can start from the very beginning with the dispatchers. The call came in and this is what happened. And then we can go to maybe law enforcement who were the first on scene. And then we can go to the firefighters who came next, and then the paramedics who were last. So we get the whole picture. Everybody has a really good perspective of the critical incident. Some questions are answered, some nagging doubts are put to rest, just because we can pull everybody together. The first responders on our team are diverse, so they have street credibility with whatever fire station or police department or comm center we go into.
So if someone comes to an existing team and says, yeah, I'd like to participate, I'd really like to do this, what kind of training, what kind of process should they go through before they should be essentially turned loose on their peers at a very delicate time?
Good question. I think the two main areas that a new member should focus on are, first, one-on-one peer support, and two, group debriefings, group crisis intervention. Once they have that technical knowledge of those two subjects, then I think first responders, my data show that first responders learn by doing or by watching someone do it. So I think the best training is to accompany the existing critical incident stress management team to a debriefing or to a diffusing and watch and learn how it's done. Then, as they develop and feel more comfortable with the team and with the agencies they're responding to, then they can take more of a leadership role.
Where do they get this initial training on peer-to-peer or group skills?
Well, there are many avenues that someone can take for training. Look on the web as far as what peer support associations there might be in their state or in the nation, and check those out. If there's a team near you in your state, do some consulting with them. Call them up and say, I'm interested in starting a department, interested in looking through some trainings that you've done. I would start there.
As far as you know, is there any training that somebody must have in order to do this, or is that pretty much up to the individual team?
That's up to the individual team as far as I know. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a fire station and seen the relief on their faces, knowing that an experienced firefighter who's seen these difficult calls and understands what they're experiencing is normal reactions to an abnormal event.
That's all well and good, but how are these teams structured? I mean, what are they composed of? What does their organization look like? That kind of thing. What do these teams actually look like in practice day by day?
Well, I can tell you about the unique features of our San Mateo team. That is, a call will come in, request for service from a team, from our team, by, let's say, a communications person. They understand that there's been a really difficult call and that their officers or their firefighters, their responders, are really having this is a traumatic call for them. So the call-out coordinator will get in touch with his team captains. The team captains then call the people on their team who are on call. They know, the team members know which week they're on call. Okay, so the team captain calls the team members. The debriefing is going to be at this time, at this station, or at this department, and here's a thumbnail sketch of the critical incident of what we know now. And then the team members show up, bring refreshments, bring flyers, education, and most important, their experience on the job and their experience with critical incident stress and their ability to understand and relate.
So, and from a nuts and bolts perspective, just keeping one of these teams together, a management perspective, what's involved?
Well, at the top level, we have a core group of people who meet about 4 times a year. They're involved in a steering committee. They guide the vision and the direction of the entire organization. They meet about 4 times a year. The regular organization meets about every other month. Within the organization itself, there are a few teams. Each team has a team captain. On each team, there's a representative from law enforcement, fire, medic, and communications. Those teams actually go out and provide the debriefings and peer support.
My name is John Warren. I chair, as team coordinator, the San Mateo County Critical Incident Stress Management Team. I retired after 28 years in the fire service for one of the local fire departments as a battalion chief, currently working with the San Mateo County Coroner's Office and a FEMA Urban Search and Rescue team.
Well, my name is Debbie Shembry, and I work for San Bruno Police Department. I am the records and dispatch supervisor there.
I'm Dick Morton. I'm a retired sergeant of police. I was with Redwood City Police for 27 years. I retired from Woodside Fire as their business manager and a finance officer, and I'm a chaplain. Have been for 19 years.
Hi, I'm Rich Reyes. I'm a retired San Francisco police lieutenant. I did 37 years in San Francisco, most of it on the street. I've been with the San Mateo County's Critical Incident Stress Management Team since its inception, for probably about 10 years now.
I'm Dr. Ann Biesick. I am the team psychologist for the San Mateo Critical Incident Stress Team, and I have been a member since 2008. My specialty is first responders, police, fire, EMTs, military coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Hi, I'm Mike Ryan. I've been a chaplain here in San Mateo County since 1985, and continued as a chaplain with Bellevue, with police and fire agencies here in San Mateo County and the San Francisco Police Department. Stayed in that role through 2002 when I went to Seattle, Washington. We had a critical event surrounding the death of one of our police officers, officer named Dave Cicutti, and that killing traumatized the entire public safety community here in San Mateo County, and those of us that were given care got our heads together and realized we needed to do something on a broader basis than just department to department, discipline to discipline. I had been, I grew up in a fire department family. My dad was a firefighter in San Francisco, and then as a pastor, I was given care to police officers and firefighters and saw the needs that they had in their lives.
I got involved in this team, San Mateo's team. The reason I got involved in San Francisco's team, I had seen how other officers had helped me, and I'd seen how Mike Ryan had helped. I had gone through the defusings, debriefings, and I figured I wanted to give something back.
The thing that we have found is that when there is an incident, it's not just one discipline that's on the call. You have police officers, firefighters, you have EMS personnel that are there, you have dispatchers that are involved in it, and a single discipline team can't take care of all of the needs of everybody that's impacted by it. They were all there, they were all at the call, they all had an experience of the incident that's going to validate and help the participants reframe that.
Rarely do you have an incident that doesn't involve more than just one agency, one discipline. It involves police and fire. And I think one of the things we liked about it is it helps the two disciplines understand the other discipline, each other, and what their roles are better. And it's nice, it works out really good that fire people know that police people suffer the same way they do from some of the same things. So that's why I think it works really well. I lost my partner in a bank robbery. And the department assigned me to handle the department and the wife, who was 8.5 months pregnant. We had nobody. We did have a psychiatrist that everybody on scene went to, on the scene of the shooting went to, but we never talked to our dispatchers. Our dispatchers heard George get killed, and we didn't find that out for 2 years. The phone was open. The phone line was open in the bank. Yeah. So it helps. And as we broaden it to other people, dispatchers, and we'll take nurses, ambulance people. We've even had tow truck drivers come. They hear about it. They say, well, can I go? Because, they're right there on the scene. They see everything you see.
Well, a classic example would be the San Bruno pipeline disaster. It was a large one. But police had one function in a disaster, fire had another, and medics had another, and all of them were completely overwhelmed with their responsibilities for so many people in such a large geographical area. By bringing people in together from all the disciplines, including command staff, participants were able to learn what each discipline faced, how they overcame their challenges, what emotions they had, and in understanding that all of their peers had suffered some form of trauma to themselves, they were, one, able to realize they weren't alone as individuals, but also the issues of, why didn't Joe do this? Why did Mary do that? How come I didn't get help when I requested it? How come the engine company passed by victims to go fight the fire, leaving them for an ambulance? All those issues are addressed, and it brought a lot of peace to people's minds and kept hostilities from flaring up within the disciplines. And they continue, hopefully, to work as a team thereafter.
Well, I think we can draw from a larger pool of trained peers when we have a number of people on our team. For example, at the Chakotay incident, we've had the entire police department, whether they're on duty or off duty, respond to the police department. Some husbands brought their wives, some of the officers brought family. So we had a lot of people. And if we only had 4 trained police officer peers on our team at the time, we would never have been able to manage to provide the amount of support that we did for the people that we did.
I think it's necessary that you have representatives from the labor unions or the police guilds that understand what it is that we want to do, but you also need to get the command staff to understand and support what it is that we're going to do, because it's the commitment to participate in a team requires time for training and time for deployment, time to take calls, time to participate in debriefs, and you need a department to support that idea. It's important to have leaders who are recognized within the specific agencies and disciplines that have the respect of their peers.
It would be best if you would have a chaplain, like Mike Ryan was, but you also have somebody that knows the personnel, a peer of firemen, or for cops, or for paramedics, or for chaplains, or for school teachers, whoever you want to target. I think you do want a certain level of rank within the team. The reason being because it helps.
Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to make sure that your agency will support you from the top down. So you just can't have a chief sign off for it because he thinks it's a good idea. If his captains and then his actual sergeants and chief and battalion chiefs and captains of the fire department, because the captains and the sergeants, they're parallel ranks. They're the ones that see their men in the field, and they're the ones that we encourage to use us.
Well, you need to get the administration to buy in. You need to be able to involve people that may be paying overtime for a team that can authorize that, or that can say, no, sorry, we're not going to pay that. You need to have peers that are dedicated to the process, that are supportive of peer support. Every level of the rank should be involved, because there are some places where if it's an administrative debriefing, they can't debrief to a line officer, because there are certain confidentialities, there are certain strengths that maybe the officer shouldn't be witness to. And I think about a command staff that I debriefed at one time, and I remember the chief of police banging on the table and in or near tears, and we provided a safe place for him to do that. Had there been one of his subordinates or direct reports in that room, he wouldn't have felt free to offload what he was feeling.
To be a good member of the team, first of all, you need to have a little bit of tenure. You have to have been exposed to some of this, and no first responder out there hasn't. They need to be recognized by their peers in their department as individuals to whom they can go and talk, and to whom they can feel safe sharing their burdens and concerns. So they need to be individuals who have the trust of their peers. They need to want to do it. That's a big part of it, because it takes a commitment to be available, to be on call, to go to regular trainings, to keep themselves sharp.
The best candidates are those people who have looked at themselves, seen that they've had a few issues over the years, or might have issues, have learned how to address them, and in knowing what's inside them, have the ability to care for others and provide support for others. In the case of law enforcement, there's always a concern that what one officer tells another might be subject to a subpoena and have to be revealed in court later. So on the police side, officers are very leery of just how deep into a conversation they want to get with a peer. But that's where the benefit of having a multidisciplined team that also includes chaplains comes into play. I say this facetiously, but we don't take notes, we don't use recordings, we don't allow anybody in a debriefing to have recording devices, no paper on the tables. So there are no records after a one-on-one counseling session, a defusing, or a group debriefing.
Well, obviously, somebody that I think a person that you would not want on the team is an individual who has a bad reputation with their peers, somebody who is known not to be able to keep confidences, somebody who has potentially been involved in too many critical incidents that they still have some issues that they need to work out.
Somebody that's really deeply into a trauma incident, or that's still acting out in different ways, probably because of the trauma. Someone who's very egotistical, someone who's very political.
The person who, high energy, that likes to be involved in the drama, the people who want information for the sole fact of having the information, the people who share all the gossip, because you will learn things about people in a confidential setting that can't be repeated anywhere. And one of the best parts of CISM is honoring the tenets that everything is confidential. We don't even talk about the things we do with other team members, except in a general general sense, and as a learning tool for the other members of the team to learn from.
I think you should avoid people that are judgmental. I think you should avoid people that, who think that's nothing but, for crybabies, they're grown men, they should be able to handle their job, or maybe they shouldn't be on the street. You should avoid people like that.
It's important that a good chaplain be at peace with who he or she is, not a wannabe, and use that phrase. Most first responders know what we're talking about. You're not there to get the badge or to hang around the guys or do the ride-along. You're there and sincerely committed to give care to them and their families. They need to know that you're not some mouthpiece back to the chief. They need to know that you're there for them. And the only way to demonstrate that is to be there with them.
When you look for a chaplain for the teams, you want someone who won't press their religion, because a lot of first responders may not have a religion, or they may be an opposite religion to the chaplain. You want a chaplain who's comfortable with any of the religions or non-religions. A chaplain who is willing to come out at all hours.
Usually we get chaplains for the team that are already chaplains for agencies. I don't think we have a chaplain involved that isn't a chaplain to either a fire department or a police department, because you have to understand who you're working with and what they'll accept and what they won't accept.
First of all, you need a competent mental health professional that knows the disciplines. I mean, there are people who are good therapists, but they aren't good when it comes to acute care or critical incident stress or disaster mental health. They tend to be, their commitment is more to the aftercare. And what we're dealing with is more the acute side of intervention, getting people shortly after they've been involved and exposed to a critical incident. I think to look for a clinician who's going to support your team, first of all, you need somebody who understands and is willing to learn about first responders and their world. That means you're going to have to give up clinical hours to come out and be with us. They need to also be people who are not interested in contracting with the department for fitness for duty evaluations, because they then put themselves on an ethical bind of working for the department for fitness for duty and then helping officers who've been in jeopardy because of some situation. So they need to make this a commitment as to which side of the fence do they want to serve. And they need to be willing to train with us and train us.
You need someone that isn't on the team to write a book, to get a movie deal, to pad their resume. I, at one point, thought that there was a good minimum age for a clinician. Some of the older ones that I've seen, they're set in their ways, unfortunately. The younger ones, maybe they don't have enough life experience. And I think life experience has a lot to do it. But I've seen some young ones that, it's like a young priest, I guess, or a young chaplain. They've maybe come out of the streets, they come out of the ghettos, or they've come out of life with their own things and they've gone into it to try to figure it out. Maybe that helps.
In order to have a clinician that's beneficial, they need to understand the dynamics of what's going on in public safety people's minds. And that's not just anybody off the street. It's somebody who works within the public safety community routinely and has set up their career to support that function.
You should look for someone who has the desire to get to know the law enforcement community, the first responders, who's willing to come and sit in a patrol car and do ride-alongs, who's willing to sit with the dispatchers and see exactly what it is that they do.
I think what gave San Mateo County and San Mateo Critical Incident Team its advantage over a lot of other teams was that first it was an interdisciplinary team. We had all the first responders that we could think of involved. We had coroners, we had fire, we had police, we had paramedics, we had communications or the dispatchers.
One of the luxuries we have is that many of the agencies that we support will respond to incidents together. The mere fact that most communities have mutual aid with other jurisdictions means that there's already links in place. They do know each other, they worked with each other. A CISM team can definitely exist without a formal legal structure. In our case, we chose to do that, one, for the tax reasons and the fact that we wanted to be able to operate at no cost, but we need funding. So in order to have funding to operate, we structured ourselves as a 501(c)(3) charity. Given some of the protections that go along with the incorporation, we can focus on some limited fundraising, apply the funds where they need to go, which is to the peers we support, and also cover the costs of all the training, and hopefully generate enough money to keep our people prepared for their responses.
When San Mateo started its team, the biggest obstacle was to make administrators, police chiefs, fire chiefs understand what the process was It wasn't it wasn't going to be a overview of incidents. It was the same thing for the individuals involved, the first responders. It was not going to be a debriefing of the incident. And it was going to be a debriefing of people's feelings, which is the big word that people didn't want to hear, and they still probably don't want to hear. People don't want to, first responders don't want to give out their emotions. Administrators thought that they were going to lose control of their departments or their people at some time. There was a trust issue that the first responders didn't have of the team because they thought we maybe were going to sit around, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, or that we would divulge proprietary information or information that could be used against them in a court of law. And the same thing was true of the chiefs. They figured their department may be involved in a lawsuit or something was going to come out that wouldn't make them look good in the press. There was a lot of negative either way. But those same issues were the same things that were happening in San Francisco when it was just with the police. People were worried about a fitness for duty after going through this. No matter who you are, you don't want to be put into the process of, is this going to make a fitness for duty for me now? Is my job on the line? I think we overcame it by folks understanding that once the meetings were in session and they completed, what happened in there stayed in there. And as time went on, because of the team and its members, we were able to overcome the idea that no, this isn't going to be a fitness for duty because there are no records kept, there are no notes kept, nobody keeps records during the process, so that nobody can say, well, we need that. No, we don't have it. So that helps. And that is how you do your respect, you earn your credentials, I would say. It's actually being there when people need it. At the scene of a shooting, at the scene of a fire, at the scene of a SIDS death, at the scene of a car accident, at the scene of a parent's or a child's death. You're there. You get called, you come out.
Both public safety agencies, police and fire, are very macho agencies, even though there's a number of women in both of them. If you ask a police officer or a firefighter after a bad incident, how you doing? I'm fine. I would say 99% of the time they'll tell you they're fine. And I don't need anything. So, and you know that's not true. Especially I know that's not true, having been involved in both sides of the fence. I remember early on, Rick and I did a debriefing at Redwood City Fire when they lost 4 people in a fire. And I walked in, and a bunch of the firefighters there were all friends of mine from my police days. And the first thing they got up and said, Morton, I ain't holding hands and I ain't singing Kumbaya. And I said, just sit down and keep your mouth shut. We don't care. And you're not going to be asked to do any of those things. And it worked out pretty well. Some of them found out they were talking about things that had nothing to do with the call that the debriefing was about, but it was a call maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago that's lived with them in the back of their minds. And sometimes when an older guy speaks up, that gives license to every young guy in the room to share.
It's care for the people they work for. And the fact that you might be fine, but your participation in assisting someone who isn't could be the key to their having a successful, long and lengthy and fruitful career, and not taking home the problems. And it's overcoming the institutional bias towards mental health that's essential. And being a resource, but not pushing yourself too hard, just being there when things happen. You know, the fact of the matter is, people drowned their emotions by taking it out on their family, kicking the family dog, or taking up drinking as a recreational endeavor. All of those lead to a shortened lifespan, quite possibly a shortened career, and possible disciplinary actions. Our goal is to see people retire, be healthy and fruitful for years.
Some of the obstacles that we ran into was command staff buy-in. The chiefs, some of the newer progressive chiefs, the younger ones that wanted to prolong, officers, careers by this new method of CISM, they were all excited about that. But some of the people that have been, the seasoned veterans that just didn't see a need for it, that was an obstacle. We had obstacles of money. We had people say, well, if they're held over, are they going to be paid overtime? Or is this comp time, or is it their own time, or what? Well, our team was very proactive at the time. We went to the chiefs groups, the fire chiefs group, the police chiefs group. We went to the training managers meetings. We met with the communications managers association. So we made ourselves visible. We responded on some high profile cases and we got good reviews. And so through word of mouth, when they heard that, oh, this CISM group seems to know what they're doing, that bought us approval. So that made the obstacles a little bit easier to jump. And when we heard of a bad call, we didn't wait for somebody to call us. We would call them. We call and say, hey, we heard you had this really bad call. We can send some peers up if you want.
Start with the agencies that you have mutual aid agreements with. If you're already working with the SWAT team from this agency or this department, if you're already working with this fire company as, backup, start there. If you have mutual aid agreements with a certain department, shouldn't your peer support team members also meet each other, also train together, also provide resources for each other?
I would tell a department that's thinking about starting one of these teams that this is an investment in the wellness of their personnel. They've spent a lot of money doing background training, advanced officer training to get these guys ready to be deployed, whether it's in the police or the fire service, probationary, EMS, and dispatch. You've invested money in them. Let's protect your investment. You know what they're going to be exposed to is going to have an impact.
But understand the cost that it will take. And that means that if you have to put people out of service to do an hour or 3-hour session, that's what the cost is going to be. But the return will be so much greater. You will get probably a 10-fold, a 20-fold return, because at some point you're going to have an individual employee saying, my boss, my company cared for me at this moment to help me get over this hump, this trauma, this pain, this injury, whatever it was, they helped.
By instituting a CISM team in your organization or sharing it with other organizations, you'll not only save the money that goes towards loss of workplace time, but you'll be building trust with those you supervise in that you care for them and that they can acquire assistance they need for a long career.
Well, I think what I would do is I would advise that administrator to consider a county or a regional team. Because I think although individual agency teams have their benefit in their own agency, I think that when an incident happens to a police department, everybody is affected. So even the peers that are trained in peer support are affected one way or another. To be able to call someone from the outside, from fire department B or C, to come into fire department A, they understand the job. They understand the stressors. But they're not involved in all the day-to-day politics. They're not involved in the personalities that may present itself if you have your own individual team.
And if I'm a service member, maybe a chief, maybe just a firefighter or a cop somewhere, dispatcher, that wants to start a team in my region, Step by step, what is it I need to do?
I think the first thing that a chief or someone on the line needs to do is call a local peer support department in their region and ask them, how did you do it? How did you start? What resources did you use? What trainings did you go to? Who do you know that can help me? Start in your local area. You will need a chaplain on your team. You'll need a mental health professional, psychologist. You will need a representative from fire, law enforcement, dispatch, and the medical service personnel. You need buy-in from the command staff at all these different types of agencies. So chiefs, captains, lieutenants, you need buy-in from the command staff, but you also need buy-in from the troops on the ground.
And if a really bad event happens, and the agency that it happened to or happened with isn't part of your formal team, is it a good idea or a bad idea to show up at the scene and offer to help anyway?
That's a terrible idea, Ralph. A debriefing team should not come where they are not welcome, where they haven't been invited, or to an agency that is not familiar with the peer support model or the goals of a debriefing.
Well, so then what would you do for that agency?
I think you don't win over a department on the concept of peer support right after a big, dramatic, critical incident where everyone's hurting. You win people over on peer support in the one-on-one connections that agencies can make with each other, on the one-on-one relationships that can happen after routine calls. Another way to win over departments on the concept of peer support is by informal presentations. If the chief asks you to come on in and give some education on what this is all about, or if your team can introduce yourself to the new chief and ask to come at a non-threatening, neutral situation and do some education. The reason it is so important to start an interdisciplinary peer support team in your area is because firefighters, communications people, people in the medical profession, and law enforcement will benefit so much from an available, organized peer support team to help them when they need it most. The reason peer support is important is because a first responder who's hurting after a critical incident will pick up the phone and call one of their colleagues who's trained in peer support before they'll call a psychologist like me.